Welcome to Mamahood After Trauma, where we stop pretending and heal out loud. I'm Emily Cleghorn, trauma survivor, cycle breaker, and mama rebuilding from the inside out. If you're ready to break cycles, trust yourself again, and rise without shame, you're in the right place. Let's go. Before we dive in, mama, if you're a mama healing from trauma and trying to parent differently, but you're not sure what support or next step is right for you, I totally understand. And that's why I've created something to help. Take my free Find Your Next Step to Calm and Healing quiz to discover where you are in your healing journey and what your next best step looks like. You'll find the link in the show notes below. Hello, mama. Welcome to this episode of the Mamahood After Trauma podcast. I'm Emily, your host, and this is the podcast where we talk about what it actually looks like to heal from trauma while also raising children, building a life, and trying to figure out who the heck we are underneath everything that we've survived. And today, I want to talk about something that I think so many of us struggle with, but especially those of us who have spent a significant portion of our lives in survival mode. I want to talk about what happens when your body forces you to slow down. Not because you chose to, not because you decided you needed a rest day, not because you suddenly became really good at setting boundaries and protecting your energy, but because your body basically looks at you and says, nope, we're done. You don't get to keep doing this. And honestly, I didn't want that wake-up call. I didn't ask for it. And if I'm being really brutally honest, there have been moments where I've been downright pissed off about it. Like ticked right off. Because when you've spent your whole life learning how to push through, slowing down can feel incredibly uncomfortable. Sometimes it even feels impossible, and sometimes it feels like failure. But then there's other times where slowing down means confronting the things that you've been able to avoid while you were busy being productive, helpful, needed, strong, and everything to everyone else. So today we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about what happens when your body starts sending you signals that you've been ignoring. Why trauma survivors can particularly feel disconnected from those signals, and what it looks like to stop treating your body like an obstacle that's getting in the way of your life, and start treating it like the messenger it's always been. Because here's the thing I want you to hear right out the gate. Your body is not, has never been betraying you when it forces you to slow down. Sometimes your body is protecting you. Full stop. So let's talk about it. One of the things I've been thinking a lot about lately is how easy it is to believe that if we're functioning, we're fine. If we're getting the kids where they need to go, if we're making dinner, we're answering the emails, we're showing up for work, we're paying the bills, we're taking care of everybody, we're checking things off the never-ending list, and from the outside, everything looks okay. Maybe we're tired. Maybe we're overwhelmed. Maybe we're a little bit snippy. Maybe we're having trouble sleeping. Maybe we're getting headaches. Maybe our stomach is constantly upset. Maybe our shoulders are permanently attached to our earlobes. But we're still functioning. So we tell ourselves, oh, I'm fine. I just need to get through this week. Things will calm down soon. Once I finish this project. Once the kids are back in school. Once I get caught up. Once I have a little more money. Once I have just a little more time. Once I figure this thing out. And then eventually, our body starts saying, no. No. Not because it's trying to ruin our lives. No. But because it has been trying to get our attention for a very long time. And we just haven't been listening. For many trauma survivors, survival mode isn't something we consciously enter. It's just normal. We learned early that we had to keep going. There wasn't a choice. We had to keep going. Maybe there wasn't enough space for us to be tired. Maybe there wasn't space for us to have needs. Maybe we learned that being useful made us safer. Maybe being needed made us feel valuable. Maybe we learned that if we could anticipate everyone else's needs, we could prevent conflict. Maybe we learned that our feelings were inconvenient. No, you don't want to be a burden, right? Maybe we learned that rest had to be earned. Or maybe we simply learned that stopping wasn't an option. So we became really, really good, like expert level good at pushing through. And here's the problem with being really good at pushing through. Eventually, you stop knowing when you've gone too far. because you don't notice the warning signs anymore. You've normalized exhaustion. You've normalized tension. You've normalized anxiety. You've normalized being overwhelmed. You've normalized never having a moment to yourself. And you've normalized waking up already tired. You have normalized feeling like you have nothing left to give, but somehow continuing to give anyway. Until that one day when you realize, I don't actually know what it feels like to be okay anymore. I only know what it feels like to survive. And I think that's one of the hardest parts of healing. Because when you've spent years surviving, sometimes you don't recognize peace when it arrives. And sometimes you don't recognize that you're exhausted until your body makes the decision for you. So this is the part where I want to get a little bit personal, because this isn't a theoretical conversation for me. I've had moments in my own healing journey where my body has essentially said, Emily, enough. Not today. Not this week. And I have not always appreciated the message. I legit believed that my body hated me. I've had to confront the reality that I can't just keep pushing myself indefinitely. I can't keep taking on more and more and more and assume that eventually I'll somehow magically find the capacity to handle it all. I can't keep treating my body like it's the inconvenient part of me. And I certainly cannot keep believing that the answer to feeling overwhelmed is simply becoming more efficient at doing too much. That one has been a really hard lesson for me because I'm really good at doing. I'm really good at creating. I'm very good at solving problems. I'm very good at taking responsibility. I'm very good at thinking about the next thing, the next step. And I'm really good at convincing myself that I can handle one more thing. Just one more project, one more responsibility, one more commitment, one more person who needs me, one more thing on the list. And then I wonder why the heck I am so exhausted, why I'm overwhelmed, why my body physically hurts, why my nervous system feels like it's constantly buzzing. And eventually, my body says, you don't get to do this anymore. You're hurting us. And that's the part I didn't want because slowing down means that I have to feel some things. It means I have to notice some things. It means I have to start asking some questions I may not want the answer to just yet. Questions like, what do I actually have capacity for? What am I doing because I want to? And what am I doing because I feel like I have to? What am I carrying that isn't actually mine? Where am I saying yes because I'm afraid of what will happen if I say no? Where am I putting my own needs last? And maybe the biggest question of all, what if I don't have to keep proving that I'm strong? Ooh. What if I don't have to keep proving that I'm strong? I think a lot of trauma survivors get really attached to the identity of being the strong one. I know I did. Because strength kept us alive. Being capable kept us alive. Being independent kept us safe. Being able to handle everything meant we didn't have to depend on people who might let us down. So we became the person who can do it all. And then we build an entire identity around that. I'm the strong one. I'm the responsible one. I'm the one everyone can count on. I'm the one who figures things out. I'm the one who keeps going. And then, what happens when you can't? What happens when your body says no? What happens when you need help? What happens when you don't have the energy? What happens when you're not okay? For some of us, that's where the real healing begins. Because we have to learn that our worth isn't tied to our productivity. Our value as human beings isn't tied to how much we can carry. Mama, you are not a packing mule. And our strength isn't measured by how much pain we can tolerate. Sometimes strength looks like stopping. Sometimes strength looks like saying, sorry, I can't do that. Sorry, I don't have the capacity right now. I need some help. I need rest. I need to change something. And sometimes strength looks like admitting the way I've been living isn't sustainable anymore. Here's something I really want you to take away from this episode. If your body is tired, that does not mean that you are lazy. If your nervous system is overwhelmed, That does not mean that you're broken. If you need rest more than you used to, that does not mean that you are failing. If you have less capacity than you thought you did, that does not mean that you are weak. And if your body is forcing you to slow down, that does not mean that your body has betrayed you. Your body has been carrying you through every hard thing, every moment you didn't think you'd survive. Every time you swallowed your feelings, every time you had to keep functioning, every time you had to be strong, every time you had to take care of everyone else, your body has been there. And sometimes what we call a breakdown is actually our body refusing to participate in the cycle anymore. So, what does that actually look like to start listening to your body? I think the first step is learning to notice the whispers before they become screams. Because sometimes our bodies whisper. You feel tired. You feel irritable. You don't really want to go socialize. You're losing your patience faster than normal. You don't feel excited about the things you normally would enjoy. You start getting headaches. Your stomach gets upset. Your shoulders feel tense. You can't sleep. You're clenching your jaw. You're constantly scrolling because you can't tolerate being alone with your thoughts. You start thinking, oh gosh, I just really need a break. Those are signals, friend. They're not necessarily emergencies, but they're information. And we have to stop dismissing every signal as an inconvenience. So instead of saying, I'm just tired, try asking, what is my body trying to tell me? Instead of, I just need to push through, ask, what would happen if I didn't? Instead of, I'll rest when everything's done, ask, will everything ever actually be done? Because here's the truth. The to-do list will never actually end. There will always be another email. There will always be another load of laundry. There will always be another appointment, another responsibility, and another person who needs something. There will always be something else to do. And if your definition of rest is when everything is finished, Mama, you may never rest. Rest is not a reward. And this is something that I think we really need to talk more about. Rest is not a reward for productivity. You don't have to earn it. You don't have to finish everything first. You don't have to prove that you're exhausted enough, and you certainly do not need permission. And you don't need to justify it. Rest is a biological need, just like food, just like water, and just like sleep. And I know that this is something that can feel uncomfortable for trauma survivors because you've spent your life believing that your value comes from what you accomplish. Resting can feel like doing nothing, but you're not doing nothing. You're recovering. You're regulating. You're replenishing. You're allowing your body to come out of survival mode. And sometimes rest is the most productive thing that you can do. Not because you need to get back to being productive faster, but because you deserve to exist without constantly performing. I want to give you something to think about this week. If your body could speak to you directly in a language that you understand, what would it be asking you to stop doing? Would it ask you to stop saying yes? To stop overcommitting? Would it ask you to stop trying to control everyone's emotions? Would it ask you to stop carrying responsibilities that belong to other people? Would it ask you to stop proving yourself? To stop working? To stop pretending that you're okay? And then I want you to ask, what would my body ask me to start doing? Maybe it wants you to sleep. Maybe it wants you to move. It wants you to go outside. It wants you to eat a really delicious, nutritious meal. Maybe it wants you to cry or laugh or ask for help. Maybe it wants you to create something or simply sit in silence. Maybe it wants you to do absolutely nothing for 10 minutes. And I know that can sound incredibly simple, but for someone who has spent their life disconnected from themselves, simple doesn't mean easy. Learning to listen to your body is a skill. And like any skill, it takes practice. If you're listening to this episode and you're exhausted, I want you to hear me. You don't have to wait until your body completely shuts down to decide you deserve rest. You don't have to hit rock bottom before you're allowed to change something. You don't have to collapse before you're allowed to say, this isn't working for me anymore. You're allowed to make changes while things are still technically fine. You're allowed to choose a different way because you don't want to keep living the old way. You're allowed to slow down before you're forced to. And maybe that's the invitation here. Maybe your body isn't asking you to give up. Maybe it's just asking you to come home, back to yourself, back to your needs, back to your capacity, and back to the parts of you that got lost while you were busy surviving. Because healing isn't just about becoming better at coping with life that overwhelms you. Sometimes healing means building a life that doesn't require you to constantly recover from it. And I think that's the work. Not becoming someone who can handle more, but becoming someone who no longer believes she has to. So this week, I want you to listen, not obsessively, not critically, not looking for what's wrong with you. Just listen. Notice. What is your body telling you? And then when you hear it, try not to argue. Try not to explain it away or dismiss it. Try not to tell yourself that someone else needs you more. Just pause and ask, what would it look like to actually listen? Thank you so much, Mama, for spending this time with me today. If this episode resonated with you, I would love it if you would share it with another mama who might need the reminder that slowing down isn't failure. It's not weakness, and it's not something that you've got to earn. And if you're ready to start understanding your own triggers and learning how to respond differently when your nervous system gets activated, I invite you to check out my resources for trauma surviving mamas. You'll find those linked in the show notes. And as always, if you haven't already, make sure you're subscribed to the podcast so you don't miss the rest of our August series. Because we're going to keep talking about boundaries, energy, and saying no. We're going to talk about why boundaries aren't mean. We're going to talk about what happens when you're always the strong one. And we're going to talk about how to say no without explaining yourself into exhaustion. Because protecting your peace isn't selfish, it's part of healing. Until next time, Mama, mend the past so you can mama in peace. Remember, you don't have to keep surviving the life you're trying so hard to heal from. You're allowed to build something different. I'll see you next time. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Be sure to follow the podcast so new episodes land right in your feed each week. And if you're wondering what your next step toward calmer, more confident motherhood looks like, take my free Find Your Next Step to Calm and Confidence quiz found in the show notes below. Until next time, Mama, mend the past so you can mama in peace.